Hello and welcome to the Beginner's Handbook. I'm Jordan.
I'm Jamie.
And in this episode we're getting into spooky season. So all about Halloween. So we did something like this last year actually. I can't remember what we actually spoke about, but it's different stuff, I promise this time. We did look at it. It was probably our favourite scary game. I think it was our favourite scary games.
Yeah. So from memory we kind of summed up different things that have happened. I remember favourite bit, unscripted throwback. Favourite bit from it was you talking about the game with the flappy jacket.
It's funny because at that conference it was that we met the guys that published that, and I was going through the book and it was them like, yes, because our names are it, just we play tested it. So
You showed us that recently.
Yeah, it's got names in it and stuff, so that's funny. It's just weird, I forgot all about mentioning that last year. Fun times. Yeah, so yeah, all about Halloween in this one then. So anything spooky, a couple of things, tips, stuff that we do. A lot of some of this we might expand on at a later time, but we wanted just to compress some of the best bits that we like in our scary games that either we both run or play in whatever order that is. So we'll just start off with the normal questions that we normally do. And first one, I would say, I'll ask this one. Have you, in your games, ever totally bricked it in one of your games? You ever been scared in any of your games? Some people get into their games. Some people are like in it, like they're in the zone. And if someone does something in the game, they feel the way their characters feel. Other people don't, tend to be a bit more relaxed and enjoy the experience rather than being traumatized by it, particularly from a horror experience. But have you ever been scared during a game, or well, yeah, I think I'll leave it there. I don't want to talk about literal or metaphorical, so just let us know.
Yeah, and then the flip side of that, if GMs, DMs, how badly have you ever scared players? Like, they might not confess it, they might not turn around and admit how scared they were, but you've seen the terror in their eyes, so let us know how you done it and how bad it was as well, I suppose.
Yep, and scared doesn't need to be like you've jumped out behind them or during, when they're maybe during a break, or like I've pulled a clown horn out during games and just blasted it at folk and gave them a fright and stuff. So it doesn't need to be something like that, but even if you've just got people really under their skin, just so you can see your players at the table starting to grip that table with white knuckles, anything like that, it was super cool to hear it, because that's like my favourite part of horror games, when I can really actually get that to happen. But yeah, I think we'll just jump straight into it then, and I'll open up with just a kind of simple, something might seem simple, but to be honest, I've seen a lot of people who run kind of horror games, and it's a lot of the time, especially if you run a game like Call of Cthulhu or something, like what somebody I know ran one of those a while back, and they found it really difficult because they took some of the kind of general Lovecraftian stuff, put it in a game, but that's not really their thing. They just found it hard to get into a flow. They tend to do fantasy, so coming into the 20s, which I find quite a hard period to place myself in, because I don't consume any media from that kind of time period. So anyway, that guy found it quite hard. So I think for me, one of the big ones, especially this, speaking to somebody recently about this actually, and I'd said to them to do something that they're actually letting them, either a game kind of theme or system, but especially anything you're putting in the games, any topics that you're familiar with, anything you're familiar with, whether that be the system or the kind of story or the themes of the game, I would absolutely say put that in your horror experience, because as a GM, especially because you need to build these scary moments up, it does take a bit of work. So if you're doing something that's comfortable for you, it's easier just to get into that flow, to be able to storytell and describe the environment. Just for talk's sake, Curse of Strahd, a lot of that I ran was a lot of fun, but there's kind of creepy zones in it. But because I knew, particularly, I didn't even know so much about the story, but I knew more about the characters and their kind of locations. So it meant that actually I didn't need to constantly refer to the book to actually keep things moving, keep suspense high, and then put in some of the horror elements that Strahd is so good for. So definitely do something, I would say, that you're familiar with. Find that if you like horror films or horror books or whatever media you consume that's horror based, I would be taking that as an influence. You can just base your game off of a scene. If there's that bit in Alien with a chest burster, use that as your kind of core middle of the game hook, and build your game around it, something that you really know, so that when it comes to improvise, which we've covered in another episode. But when it comes time to improvise, you're able to do it without sitting needing to refer to like pages of notes. So that's what I would say about one of the tips that at least I give is just to do topics or a game or especially a system as well that you're familiar with, to just let you get moving with the game, and tell the story in a way that will affect your players.
Yeah, and I was going to say the flip side to that, but it's not. But remember as well that if you've got whatever group of players there, then if you pull out, again, like Strad, Vampire, so whether or not anybody has heard of Strad or any associated stuff with that, as soon as you go Vampire, 99.9% of people have got some form of reference for that. So when you're building up tension or, whatever you're doing, whatever you're describing, the amount of work, the amount of effort that you're going to need to put in is going to be significantly less than, say, you've got a bunch of players there that have never played Cthulhu before, don't know what a Lovecraft is, or, whatever, right? Then you're going to have to put in more work for them to understand what's going on, rather than they're coming in with that base level knowledge that you can then build on top of. So again, familiarity for yourself is key, so that you're not interrupting flow, you don't have to kind of stop, pause, whatever. But also for your players, if you keep that in mind, then if they're familiar, then if you're a bit nervous, if you're a bit unsure, if you become a bit too focused in your story and a bit too rigid, and your flexibility starts to go a little bit, then because they're familiar, then there's a bit less work to do there. If they're unfamiliar, then bear in mind you might need to work a bit harder to keep them on track.
I don't. That's an interesting point. That specifically, because I think in some cases, yes, that's true. I don't think people really need to. I actually think people that don't know Call of Cthulhu or Lovecraftian and stuff, Call of Cthulhu games, especially the published ones, the actual proper ones by Chaosium, they're actually better for people that don't know the lore, because they're not expecting stuff anymore. And a big part of Cosmic Horror is about that unknown element. So that's actually something that's super interesting to bring up, because I was talking about Cult, which is very cosmic in bits, and it's better not to know what's going on. I like a lot of surreal horror. There's a great Delta Green campaign out there called Impossible Landscapes. It's super surreal, and pretty much if you don't know, well, it's better you don't know anything about the source material, because then it's even weirder and creepier and kind of ominous. So it depends on it depends the setup for your game though. Like, I like to just drop people in a game and just say, get on with it. But there's absolutely value though, especially if people are new to like role playing games. I would definitely say that for sure as well. When I ran the Alien games for a bunch of guys who hadn't they'd played some games, but there were some new people there who hadn't played games but knew Alien, so it was easier for them to get into that space. So it kind of depends the game or the flavour of game you want to do. So just see if it's a one shot with a bunch of people that might be their first time playing. It's better to pick something familiar, like you're saying, because it means it's almost like that kind of difficulty curve for actually learning to play. Is they're not getting bogged down with info they don't understand. Like, I think Cyberpunk's, like, the general Cyberpunk kind of theme can be hard for people if they don't know anything about it, especially if they're not technical. And you have to kind of describe, your VR. I can't even remember what Cyberpunk Red calls it, but your whole net running stuff. Like, see, having to describe that to people that don't know anything about computers, which I've had to do. Well, part of my job is describing stuff to people technical stuff to people that don't know technical stuff. It can be pretty hard. So for new players especially, I think doing something that even just thematically is familiar to them is a lot easier, just for their kind of workload in their head. But it does. I say though, the wee caveat is it depends what you want to run. If you want something like cosmic or surreal, it's better they don't know much about it. Maybe let them know it's going to be weird though, because I've seen a surreal horror game being ran recently, and I knew kind of what was going to be going on for that game, just general vibe. Other players didn't, and then they would kind of get frustrated throughout the game because they weren't getting the clues solved. They thought it would be more like a Cthulhu game. so their expectations were a bit kind of squiff from what they were expecting, something different than they got, basically. Whereas I knew the brand of horror the GM was going for. So yeah, that's super interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because it gives me something to talk about to the guys.
Yeah. And that ties into another thing, which is just umbrella, we'll call it background research. So there's different ways that you can use this. Number one, finding out whether your players are familiar with the source material. So like John was talking about, if you want to do something cosmic horror and you don't want them to know so that everything is a shock or surprise or whatever, then if you know what your players already know about it, it'll then let you pitch the direction that you're going to take the game. Again, on the flip side of that, if they are familiar with it, then you go, great, right, I don't need to panic and try and set the scene too much if that's something you're not comfortable with, or, you know, whatever. But also, what that allows you to do is more efficiently terrorize your players, shall we say. Now, again, caution, you know, if you do that too efficiently and too well, then you may be cleaning up a literal or metaphorical mess. So bear that one in mind. And of course, you know, you shouldn't traumatize your players. Scaring, that's okay, as long as everybody's okay with that. But yeah, traumatize, that's maybe too much.
Play some of the games that I play, the books actually encourage pushing that boundary to the point where, like, I don't know about that, man. I don't know. But yeah, no, I totally agree. So yeah, the background research is a good one because you can be pulling in stuff like, you know, even if it's just a case, like I talked about settings that are familiar to you, you know, even just from talking about that, like if you've got a game or you want inspiration, doing a bit of reading or watching a film or a show that kind of touches or scratches that itch of game that you want to run, it's a great way just to get inspiration. And I'm saying research and you're really just watching a TV show, but it can absolutely help you run good games. I think it's actually Sandy Peterson. I can't remember the conference he said it at, but Sandy Peterson's involved in Call of Cthulhu and Chaosium, for those who don't know. But a lot of stuff that he was saying, there's a video online of him making a game with the people at his talk, and he actually bases it off of basically the actual game that he's preparing is based on a scene in a film. I can't remember what any of it is or the details, but literally it's that scene, the big turning point, the high point of the whole game. He takes I think he asks the crowd to pick a movie scene and they build something from there. So actually totally that background research, even just the creation period and not just in the running and trying to scare people, is a good way to do it. So that's super interesting. I never even thought about that when I was talking about the familiar themes. So
yeah, and again, you don't need to go down the route of, you know, you figure out that one of your players is absolutely petrified of spiders, so that you go out and you buy a tarantula and you keep it in your house and then you throw it at them, you know, halfway through the game. Right?
Sounds like something the guys would do. I'm thinking of one of my groups, and I know that one. Yeah, some of them are antagonistic, I'll say, so I could see them doing it. I wouldn't, because I don't want to deal with the arguing, but they would.
Yeah, well, again...
different groups, though. It's different styles of groups.
Yeah, so you don't need to be extreme and go down that route, but what you could do as well with that sort of thing is that you could incorporate details of either past games that you've had as a group into it and rework them.
That's a good one.
You were telling me earlier on, and was it one of the games you were at, or was it somebody else that you'd seen?
I can't remember. Oh yeah, there was something. It was actually something I'd watched online.
See, background research.
Yeah, so yeah, this was ages ago, but for sure that could definitely count as background research. But certainly using elements of other games. We've actually had even, maybe it's not in the context of horror, but we've had plenty of games with the GM, maybe the Big Dwarf one, the GM has brought in stuff from like months prior, and it's made some really good hooks, but you could do the same for actually horror elements as well. certainly I've ran games that I told people. I spoke about Alien. I told the guys there wasn't going to be an alien in that game. They're going, an alien game without an alien. I said, no, there's not. But then I threw that in later on, and I used one of the scenes from the film, just to kind of surprise them with it, because they actually didn't expect it to happen. So, but that was almost like we call back to conversations we'd had, because there was just bits there. So stuff like that's great to do.
Yeah, and again,
Callbacks, yeah.
like drawing in stuff from your players' lives as well. So again, don't do too much research and become a bit creepy about it. But like Alien, if you were doing whatever encounter, this ship distress signal go on at all the players. Everybody's going along. First person that they find like ID stuff for, and it's one of the names of the players at the table. And then they go along the ship and they find somebody else, and it's somebody else's name that's at the table. And you could do stuff like that, and then instantly everybody's went from thinking alien adventure to hang on, the rules have been kind of shifted about. And if you keep kind of dropping a little bit of real life for the players, and then see what you can do with that.
Do you know, the kind of personal callbacks is an interesting one, because it's a good way to like suck people in, like just grab their attention. I mean, this is why films like Marley and Me and stuff like are really suck people in, because like a poor puppy dies in that, and everybody starts greeting, because everybody knows what that feels like, So unless you don't like dogs, in which case I don't have anything to say. But the personal callbacks are good just to get.
That's us just lost all the cat people.
No, people can like both. Yeah, people can like both. It's true. I like both. I just have a preference for one over the other. I won't say which. But yeah, the personal callbacks is actually a super good one, because that's just a general kind of clever tool that you can use for your games generally, So, but for horror, it can kind of really hone people, specific people, especially if you're wanting to grab that attention, maybe to set up something later on, or a scare or something. That's a great way to do it. That's what actually we did for the Warhammer game, but we'll come to that, because that's one of the things we'll just mention later. Actually, let's mention it now. So one of the games that I done yonks ago, we've spoken about this before, was a Warhammer Wrath and Glory game. But at the end, we were basically right up near the end, there was going to be a big boss fight and this big warp portal. If you don't know Warhammer, I'm not going into it, just there's too much to talk about. It's like 40 years of lore. I'm okay. But at the end, there was like a portal that opens up and baddies start shooting out. But I'd ran this game a few times before, but with family members and stuff, so I had a good idea how it was played and what we were doing, and I knew what the ending obviously was going to be, because I'd ran it and read it before. But I thought it would be cool, because I knew the guys would probably quite enjoy it too, that one of the players from that game, who the guys know, I wanted them to come and enjoy it, but make them the baddie instead, because he's got like a crazy powerful psyker. I boosted their level up and gave him this nasty spell, which the guy didn't use it anyway, which was a shame, because it would have totally killed at least one of his. Yeah, so anyway, I set stuff up, there was doing the build up, and then I played an audio clip which the player had recorded something for me and sent it on, and I played it through my speakers. I could see they're kind of like, what's going on? You could see this. There was a bit of discussion around what it meant or something. That I think I had to repeat it though, because I don't think it was fully clear on the speaker. But it was right at the end of that kind of sequence. I think it was almost, I kind of felt, at least when I was running it, I felt like it was about to go into this thing like strategizing. It was almost going into the strategy phase, because they knew the baddie was there. And you might remember it differently, but that's how it felt. And then that player bust through the back door and just came in fully all kitted up in their long black jackets and black gloves, and as their character, as their evil psyker, and scared the bejesus out of some of the guys at the table. One person in particular, poor guy, man, I never give him a break sometimes with scaring him, but but yeah, so we actually used a real life jump scare, rather than me shouting at somebody at the table. I had them bust through the back door and scare the bejesus out of folk. I don't think you jumped though. Wait, where were you sitting?
No.
Were you there? You seen them probably come in then.
The strange thing about this was spotted the setup but still didn't click what was going on. And it was only after they were through the door I went, right, I get it now. But I don't jump super easy. So, and having that extra bit of distance is pretty good.
Sorry, it was like 3 people that could have been a target if it was someone evil coming through the door. So all good.
But that's literally it. It's I've got between 1 and 3 people before I need to decide what I'm doing here. If this is indeed a killer at the door, there's a reference there for anybody who was present there. But yeah, no, it was that was a good one because I wasn't clued in beforehand. I wasn't expecting it.
Nobody knew.
Well,
I didn't even think they were coming. They were waiting for like 20-30 minutes at the back door.
Not strictly true, actually, now that I remember exactly. So the setup for this was our group, as a joke, went, haha, yeah,
that's what it was. That's right.
Why don't you get him to turn up and he can be the big bad guy, the big boss fight at the end. Ha ha ha, joke,
like
joke,
corrupted
joke.
psyker and stuff.
Yeah.
You were joking about it. I think because we hadn't started, I don't think, or maybe it was very, if we started, it was like first game or something. And I'd said to the player, do you want to come in? Because we were joking about it, but I think it would be awesome, and I think you guys would have loved it too. And they were like, yeah, they were kind of like, no, because, I don't know, it might not be cool or whatever, but yeah, I'm glad we done it because it was cool. It was such a fun night as well. So
it was, and I think that's maybe also part of the reason because as it was happening, it was, what? No, I think I managed to click on relatively quick after that, and again, when it happened, I went, oh yeah, because I seen you do this, and I see, right, okay, get it, because at one point I did see the kind of furtive under the table text thing, but I just assumed that was you sending a message to somebody else at the table answering a question or something. So I didn't think anything of it, and it was only afterwards that
the pieces fall into place. But that's what I forgot. It was actually the group suggestion to actually do that. That's right.
Yeah,
I'm glad you did because it was cool, man. We still speak about it sometimes. So that kind of, that leads on quite nicely into like jump scares and stuff, which really I've kind of covered bits of it there. Is there anything about jump scares really in a game that you would maybe add to the conversation? Yeah, I find them kind of hard actually, thinking about it.
Why do you find it hard? Just quickly.
Because they're not that easy. Do you know what? Maybe we'll go through the flow actually. So one of the things I think, we'll come back to jump scares. That was obviously like a literal jump scare. There was a bit of build up and stuff happening, but then it happened.
It was a literal jump scare for one of the players.
Yeah,
it was literally a jump out the seat moment, and it was fantastic.
It was awesome, man. I love it. That's such a fond memory for me. But so I think just taking away, because I'll come back to jump scares, I do think they're tricky, but there's things that can make them easier to achieve, and they can be good payoff for like a scary moment. I think I'd done one for like the alien attacking somebody at the toilet in the alien game we done. I've used them various times, but I think a good setup. So kind of peeling back a bit from there is really it's the last few things that I would. This is like the main key things that I would definitely put, and you don't need to be sitting like a DJ or some big technical wizard to get all of this stuff happening. But first thing, and I always do it partly because silence at the table, I'm fine with it and stuff. But especially I've just found with newer folk, sometimes a bit of the background music can just help. It helps set the scene. And it means that if people are thinking about stuff, or if they're talking to each other or talking to an NPC and they need a minute to think because maybe they're finding it hard to talk in character, background music I find just generally can help ease all of that and just reduce any awkward stuff that might happen at the table. But for horror, it's really, really good just to set that tone, especially if they're going into, I definitely use this for Alien, like a big, metal tube that's it's a big spaceship, just metal, and it's wet just with condensation because of the cold kind of sub-zero temperatures in space, and everything thawing out of deep space or whatever. having a bit of music and a wee bit of ambient sound, just of water dripping and stuff. That can just get people without needing to sit and explain and just like elaborate to the nth degree. You can set that scene. It's kind of like the picture tells 1,000 words, but it's music instead that help and noise that gets you into that. That's something for sure. I recommend for any game, it's worth just getting something. It's not necessary, so don't worry about it if you've not prepared it. But if you've got the time, I think it's really good to do. I think it's a lot of fun. Our Nazi biker game that we were doing, just put on some royalty-free music, but it was enough just to kind of get the vibe, at least for myself, so I could start running it properly. But for Alien and some of these horror games, it's really good for mood setting and atmosphere.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well, like, what it does for your players is one thing, but you as well, that's the other thing to consider. So if you're somebody that kind of struggles, or you feel that you struggle, again, you might not necessarily struggle, but if you're not 100% confident in yourself, then that little bit of music can act as that sort of subconscious reminder. So again, for us in that game, it's generic American rock, royalty free stuff that
Kevin MacLeod, thank you, and Comtech.
Yeah. So with that, then if it's got that kind of general in the back of a movie in a biker bar vibe thing, whatever going on with it, then it's keeping you in that place, which means that rather than having to really fight hard to get your imagination to work, and then from that point going, right, okay, how are we going to go from point A to point B to whatever it is, then you're already kind of halfway there, and you've got that boost. And again, for the other players there, again, it will help them. Music's never really going to detract from what you're doing unless it's
too loud
or inappropriate for whatever reason, whether it's, again, you're trying to set up this biker image and then all you've got is kind of, Euro electro pop playing in the background. It's probably a bit of a clash for the imagination at that point.
Yeah, that contextual awareness, like, because you know what, that would probably work with like a biker cyberpunk game, but it's 1973 or whatever year that game's set in. It's like old style bikers. It's just the wrong fit, the wrong era, the wrong genre almost. So that's a good point, because there's nothing wrong with not doing music either. But for me, it helps me even get into, especially with horror, it gets me in a kind of storytelling mood, just to almost acts as a reminder just for me to remember to kind of pause at bits and just bring stuff down and try and pull people in when I'm describing stuff. Because just generally I need to talk like this all the time. So sometimes with horror, it's better just to slow it right down. Just as you can build that tension. And and it gives, I think more important than just me getting that, it's good for players too, and they can get the vibe without needing to be told stuff. There's nothing I hate more than getting several paragraphs talked at like a lecture just to get me in a scene, when usually maybe a wee picture, maybe just describing a scene and letting us try and explore it might help instead. Whereas the music kind of covers that part of it. It lets me avoid needing to describe the feeling of the room. It feels scary. Just put on some scary music. It just helps. It's more emotive. So use a tool if you can.
And again, ultimately, that's the thing. Like Jordan's saying, like, you could spend 15 minutes or whatever talking and describing.
That might seem crazy, by the way, but I've been a victim of that. Like, even like last week, I was a victim of that. So, I mean, it's something that I see a lot. And it's usually, I've said to these folk that I totally respect the work and time they put into it, that they're kind of crafting their skill almost. But normally they're stressed out, they come and they usually complain and stuff because they're not prepared enough, and they're always never happy with games. But I suggest stuff like doing music, do this, do that, just try something to make it easier for yourself.
And that's the thing, like, when the music's there, it's permanently setting the scene, it's permanently telling the story when you're not talking.
That's a good point.
So if at some point you need to double check a rule, if your players are unsure and they're flicking through a character sheet, if, whatever, then the music's there, you hear it, it's in the background, it's in your subconscious, and it's keeping you there. Rather than if they're trying to concentrate your players and they're looking through a character sheet or a rule, and you're talking to them to keep the tension or whatever, then they're trying to focus on you, they're trying to focus on the sheet, they're trying to think about what they're going to do, they're back to you, sheet, plan. And that keeps bobbing about, and it's going to break them from being there and being in that moment. Whereas with the music there, they can look away, they can go through that. And again, if they've walked into a biker bar, everything's fine, and then one of the players has accidentally kicked over one of the bikes outside, and now everybody's, starting to get up, tables are getting pulled, whatever, then it can be going from general, soft, American style rock to something with a bit more pace, something with a bit more aggression behind it, whatever, and that changing of the track at that point, you don't need to say, these people seem very angry and are about to beat you to a pulp. Just flick, track, so-and-so stood up. That's all you need to say. Done. Everybody knows what's going on at that point.
Yeah, I think, I totally recommend music just generally. So, and that kind of leads on as well, because some music tracks can help support this too, but certainly if you're trying to build a scary scene, the actual ambience of the scene, the environment, the kind of atmosphere that's in your scene, I think music can help with that. But then usually there's bits where you need to build suspense, maybe there's shadows moving, there's eyes twinkling in the darkness, think of a million other things that you could do, sounds, whatever. And I think that's where you can, setting the atmosphere is good, but then you've got to build the suspense to get that scary scene. This all kind of leads up sometimes, or sometimes not, into the jump scare. But actually the suspense is a good thing. That's when you can be slowing down your voice and like bringing people in, and just generally using a bit of tonality and general, I don't know what other terms is used for your voice, but stuff like that can really help build tension in music, actually, just because I use music a lot. There's specific tracks I've used in things like the Curse of Strahd. A guy called Travis Savoy on YouTube has a whole suite of music, like really good music for D&D, like it's top quality stuff, and he's got a whole set for Curse of Strahd. But there's one song in particular, I think it's called The Creeping Hut, which I used for the Baba Lysaga fight with my players. But that's got amazing little sound bites in it, like the sounds of like twigs and trees like creaking and stuff. And with music, you can actually use that to help build suspense. So there's bits I'm preparing the baddie, I can hear the music getting to the point I want it to, so I'm kind of talking normally and I'm going just to make sure I hit the point where I can reveal the baddie but have the creak happen first. So you can use your voice and all these other kind of strategies. We'll maybe do an episode on that. But the music's a nice way to build that suspense for that final payoff. Maybe it doesn't even necessarily need to build up to a jump scare. It could be a reveal, like in the case of the Curse of Strahd game I did. It revealed itself to be the big huts got up and started moving. That was the thing creaking behind them as they were leaving. So, however, it can then lead into that nice, well-known jump scare that's just a big boo at the end of all of it, which is a good way, to get folk like the way that guy coming through, the player came through the door, just to scare the living Jesus out of all of you, or tried to at least. And it worked. I think it got a couple of you, so that was a success.
And with music as well, we've talked about using it, also not using it.
Cutting it. That's a good point.
And like the danger is, if it's the first time that you're using something like that in a game, that you go all out and you fill every single nanosecond of space with music or a sound effect or whatever, so that there's always something going on with audio. But again, cutting it can also be useful. So if it's players, they're in the woods, they're at a campsite, you've got sound of a campfire there, sound of talking in the background or whatever, and then at some point during that you just cut that and leave it. So without saying anything to the players, at first they might go, oh dear, technical issue, and talk. and do whatever they're doing. But then after a while, when it doesn't go back on and they don't see you attempting to put it back on, then at that point, either the penny will drop or somebody might actually comment on it and talk to you about it. And then at that point, you can either acknowledge that, not acknowledge that, whatever. But cutting music is one thing. Gradually fading it out just by dropping the volume down over a period of time so that it isn't super obvious that that's what's happened. So that very, very gradually the sound starts to disappear. Again, you can use that for creating tension and suspense in different ways. If you're dropping it down gradually, it's probably going to lead more for suspense. If you cut it, it's going to give you more tension, I would say.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point, because even that whole track you used for the Baba Lysaga stuff, it cuts. I think the music dips right down, and then it's like a second, and then the kind of creaking trees happen. So it's actually, that's the exact reason I was using it, without just naturally thinking, because I thought it sounded like a good way to hit that kind of note that I was wanting to hit. So, but yeah, it was a good point, because certainly in like things like Alien, when you've got the alien coming up behind people, sometimes dropping and cutting out the sound effects can help, because they kind of go, it's almost like that hold your breath moment. Now all of this, like, you don't need the music to do all of this. You can do this just by the way you tell the story. If you're building suspense, you can bring the volume down, maybe the pitch down, slow your speech out, and then take big kind of strategic pauses, if you want to call it that, to build that tension. If you're going for that music option and trying to do everything that we've suggested there, it's basically, it can be hard unless you've got some board on your computer that you can do. Like you can access all the tools you need and all the volumes or the plays and pauses and starts. Roll20 and stuff can do it. It's just not, it can be hard unless you're used to it. So just be aware of that if you try and use all these sound effects, because I've got myself in knots trying to do stuff like that, and I'm a technical guy, so sometimes it's hard at a table when you're busy. But yeah, that all kind of leads up to the big jump scare, and there's not much more to say about it, because a jump scare is a jump scare. Everybody knows what that is. It's the big boo. I mean, I mentioned it doesn't need to be a jump scare. It could be a reveal. It could be anything like that. But if you do opt for a jump scare, you can just shout at somebody at the table, bring them in closer, shout at them, get a clown horn, whatever technique you want to scare the bejesus out them. And in the case of that Warhammer game, it's somebody literally kicking in the back door. To give a nice entrance. So
yeah, I do think though that the busting through the door does get its own special category though. I think using another player as a prop, I think I get special recognition, I think. But with jump scares as well, the main thing is commit, right? Don't
kind of weasel out at the end.
Don't go, that's not going to get anybody. It needs to be there. And what I would say is, as soon as in your head you decide that you're going to do it there and then. Don't go, right, I'm going to do it in another minute, because as soon as you do that, you're losing that impact, that sudden thing, and ultimately it's an unexpected movement, it's an unexpected stopping of things. It's it's immediate, so you need to, as soon as you decide that you're going to do it, just do it.
Yeah, because you don't want that momentum to go. See, if you put all that time into building it up, and honestly, it's actually really hard. Like, I run mostly horror games, usually horror games, at least, and if I don't run horror games, it's usually games that have horror in it at some point. But I'm not sitting and trying to make every moment scary, because it's hard work. I mean, it's hard work. But when I do want to get that jump scare, or usually it's a reveal I build up, it's usually a monster or something creepy or some horrible reveal that maybe they've realised that their best friend turns out to be one of the baddies that's been killing folk, or something. It does take a lot of work and effort, and actually, out of all the preparing that I might do in a game, that's usually where I put the most prep work into, because I personally find that the hardest bit about games. And that's why I would say the jump scares are harder. I don't tend to use them as much. They're fun. I like doing them every so often, but they're usually, I don't worry about them as much because I do think to actually execute them properly is difficult without just being super loud. But building everything else up until that reveal though, that's like where I put the most work because it's the hardest bit to do.
Yeah, and like with a jump scare, if there's music there, then cutting the music before you make a sound or whatever it is that you're planning and doing, that will help you to do that because subconsciously everybody's going to hear the sound cut, and then just as they're going, why is that, just if you can trigger it at that point, then you're distracting them and then hitting them with the impact of it. Again, if you're planning and doing it as a one-off in your game, then target the jumpiest person at the table because you're doing it once and that's it, so you want you want it to have the effect that you want it to have. So if you do it at the coolest cucumber that's there and they don't react, then it's kind of taking the impact out of your scary horror game, isn't it?
To be fair though, if there is somebody that's not the coolest cucumber at the table, you'll probably still get them when trying to get that guy.
Probably.
Yeah, I've seen that happen. Do you know that kind of leads on then to kind of like the last thing that really I'd like to just mention, just for anybody that is interested in it's just a different thing as like I mentioned, I find that doing a full game that's all scary. Honestly, I've never played somebody's game that's been like that, but I've never really attempted to do that myself because it's too much work. Probably that first ever game I done, I probably tried something, but I don't think I did, but I probably did just because that was where my head was at the time, just to try and, that's my ideal what a horror game would be like. But I actually find it's better just to, especially for scary games, or especially maybe brutal, or I say brutal, I mean like hard to survive games, like Call of Cthulhu could be one of them, but Morkborg and some of these games are tinged, and really that's kind of a bit more like extreme for like entertainment's sake, but it's a clear influence of horror in there. But I would always, even with the scariest and most horrible of games, encourage the fun bits in the games. Allow people to have a joke at the table. Don't be trying to be like, that's not the vibe I'm going for, and just shushing them. I've seen that happen, and it's just totally off-putting. So allow people to have fun and to have that just almost state of enjoyment, and then really just do the bait and switch and pull them into something a bit more. If it's a scary kind of body horror game, all the horrible stuff. If it's just a kind of high tension game, maybe more like a thriller, pull them into that when you need to. Allow for that, almost like the highs and the lows to be brought in, because if you've got some high bits, it makes the lows much better. I actually think there's a lot of horror films that I think there's horror generally as a genre is almost done better in films that are not horror films. To a lot of horror films, there's a lot of really good films that are scary throughout, but a horror film I think is a great example of it is It Chapter 1, the remake one, because it's actually fun. It feels more like a Goonies film to me than a horror film, but the scary bits I think complement that, are kind of, they're the opposite, but they're emphasised, or they're improved because of how funny the other bits of the film are. And I think games, personally, maybe it's just my style, I find that easiest to run, but I find it the most rewarding as well for the scary bits. I mean, Warhammer's a ridiculous game, it's just crazy, it's nuts, it's over the top, it's ultra violence, but then having wee jump scares like that is a different whole thing. It's just a total shift from what we were doing. The Alien game we're doing, we're enjoying the aspect of knowing everybody at the table knew about Alien except a couple of people that were there. We're just joking around with the kind of cliches of Alien and Alien style sci-fi films that have been clearly influenced by Alien. So we're kind of playing around with those. I'm putting them in the game just for a joke, for little nods to the films, just to just encourage that fun aspect of the game, because you are playing a game after all.
Yeah, and something that I never really thought about, but kind of out of game chat as well.
Yeah.
Because again, depending on what sort of group you've got and how the game is and how it's going, that might be a thing. It might be a bit out of game chat, back to the game RP, then a wee bit out, back in. It might bounce between the two. And we didn't really do that a whole lot during the Alien game, but anytime there was because it was a new system for, I think, everybody there, bar maybe like one or
I think
two
it was just
people.
me, maybe.
Yeah,
Alien,
I'm thinking
yeah.
that.
I think it was
So,
just me.
there was clarification of rules that were happening and things.
Yeah.
And again, between players. And then there'll be an alien in the vent, laugh, laugh, laugh. And then...
Well, to be fair, there wasn't, and then it went into the vent. So.
Yeah. Yeah, but moments like that where you're breaking away from what's going on, again, like John's saying, don't get upset, don't try and like hard and railroad people back into some. Let it go, let it do its own thing, and then just as it's going out and just as it's getting to that nice point where everybody's nice and relaxed, alien jumps out the vent at them, or whatever is happening in whatever situation, to kind of bring it back into the realm that you're hoping it to stay in, but don't force it there. And again, with us with the alien, it did go in the vent not because it was going in to get everybody back on track. It wasn't going in because that's your favourite bit of Alien, when they jump out the vents, or anything like that, because a jump scare was getting engineered. It was because of what had happened in the game, that the vent was off because we were trying to do stuff in the vent, and then as it was taking damage, as it wanted to run away, there's the perfect place for it to run away to.
Yeah, and I mean, even with that example, it's like, I think what happened was just we're starting to figure, just we're really trying to suss out what was going on. But that's when that whole alien kind of birth scene, or whatever you would call it, it happens. Now, it's not like that's like, oh, it's big jump scares, because that's not really how the alien that scene's constructed to do. But it becomes a thing where it's like, hold on, something's bad, and then it gets worse, then the alien comes out, and it's real bad. Although I was quite lucky because I didn't roll anything real bad for you. But I think one of those rolls is like a kill, like you just die, which is pretty brutal for something you've just met that's this big,
Yeah.
But yeah, totally. So it's almost that bait and switch is how I would describe it. It's really good. And tying it back into jump scares, you could be building that up. I've had guys saying, he's going to do it, he's going to do the jump scare, and then I just let it fade away, and then they ask something, and then I jump at them anyway, and then they get scared. But that's all in the spirit of fun, which is why I bring it up, because I've been involved in games and I really love horror. Like, it's my favourite genre, and I love role-playing games that's in horror, and I love all the horrible stuff too. But there's so many, I think, because it is a hard genre to do, and I'm by no means perfect at it. I struggle with it a lot of the time. I still come away enjoying it, but I just usually haven't hit the notes I wanted, just because it's difficult. But I've had people that have ran games that just, it's almost like they take it, because it is hard, so they're taking it serious, which is fair enough. But then they kind of limit it and they constrict it because they want. But the easiest way to do horror is to make it in the mold you want it. But for role playing games, that's not so great, and it can ruin the experience.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
That's all I have to say about it.
To kind of contrast it as well, it's like comedy or somebody try to be funny. The harder they try, the less funny they are. It's that same thing, and if you're doing horror and you're super, super serious, then again, it's probably going to start to detract away, because in whatever moment, having that light-hearted bit, that kind of break, that lull, then means that when you click back into the more serious part of it, it's emphasising tension to it if it's done properly. So
yeah, and yeah, I just think that's probably the most user-friendly way, if you want to call it that, to get into it. Even that Nazi biker game we're doing. Now, to be fair, it's more investigative, and those Grindhouse games are generally a bit more supposed to be schlocky. Like, so it's not supposed to be like deep, unsettling horror, But most of that game, even at the investigative bits that you're seeing some of the Nazis, and there was a bit of tension in parts, and there's all this stuff going on. It was I actually had a good time running it because it was fun. But I hope you guys had the same, but I just found it very fun. Generally, there was bits everybody's making jokes here and there, And there's some people I know, even though it's a kind of schlocky thing, and the 80s horror is a bit kind of cheesy as well. But I know people that if he was running that would have been a no-go. That game would have been like, he would have been locking it down, and I probably wouldn't have enjoyed it, and I doubt you guys would have too, just because I've played with a lot. I know the games he's like, and that wouldn't have been one of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, totally. Just encourage the fun aspect. It is horror. But after all, you're playing a game, and just sort of allow yourselves just to have that kind of moment of brevity or whatever before you start slamming people with like player character death in one hit or whatever. Just have that shock value in there without needing to be shocking, if that makes sense. You don't need to be super ultra violent. It doesn't need to be really uncomfortable topics you cover. You can just be using that kind of jump between these kind of like from happy and fun stuff to like horror and scary stuff. That just shift and dynamics can be enough to make it a scary game and help make it even better. So yeah, I think that's everything I've got anyway. So that's some of our kind of Halloween top tips for games. Yeah, we just wanted to give you something a wee bit different than last year, and actually this has maybe sparked some kind of cogs for some stuff I'd like to explore in more detail later. So yeah, I think that's really it from us this time. Is there anything you want to say to tie it off?
No, just use all these tips responsibly, and remember, you'll need to clean up the mess, both metaphorical and literal. And with that, if you want to give us your thoughts on this episode, or if you want to let us know how you scare people or any of that sort of stuff, if you're watching on YouTube or listening on YouTube, there's comments underneath. There's Facebook, there's X, there's Instagram as well. You can fire something up there, and there's a Discord server as well.
Cool. So that's it from us then. So just want to say once again, thanks again for listening and or watching, and it's bye from me.
And me as well.